do it open? Zong, sorry. I will be the one who open the session before introducing you, so I can give the introduction first
Okay.
before you guys. Okay. Ki, do you open or I will be the one who open?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Can
Sip.
you-
Hello everyone. From Gameseed Incubation. Ya teman-teman, ini adalah sesi inkubasi ke-10 ya, ke-10 udah cukup banyak nih. Kita masih ada beberapa lagi. Jadi teman-teman kemarin udah bahas tentang analytics, metric, analitik, tentang in-app purchase juga, tentang nanti kita akan ada tentang ads di besok. Nah, hari ini kita bakal ngebahas tentang store listing. So hopefully teman-teman udah punya apps yang udah disiapin untuk di publish di Play Store berupa early access kan ya gitu ya. Jadi sebelum teman-teman nge-spending ad credit, kita akan ngebahas ad credit di hari Sabtu ya harusnya nanti ya. Di Sabtu kita akan setelah sesi training setelahnya kita akan bahas tentang ad credit gitu ya. Sebelum kita nanti nge-spending ad creditnya, teman-teman butuh buat nge-improve store listingnya. So kalau enggak nanti jadinya agak sayang gitu ya. So today we will learn from Zhong Wei from Google Play, who will share us about how to create a great store listing. So you guys can use the knowledge and use it to improve your own store listing. So hopefully when we give you the ad credit to use the Google Ads or other ads network, you can make sure that you get a good conversion rate from the one who comes from your ads to the store to install, etc. Right? Yeah. Also because this is also the last session from the Google Play. Yeah, we also have another session from Google, but this is the last from the Google Play. If you have other question regarding Google Play, etc., you can also ask Zong. Okay, Zong. Yeah, I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you are free
Wafi.
to share your session. Thank
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Wafi. Selamat datang, everyone. I am super excited to kind of share with you guys, a lot about how do you basically get the most out of Play Store listings. So I'm Zhong. So I'm from the Google Play team. You've probably seen Dan. He did a session before me. So, we are from the same team. So I cover Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And I'm based in Singapore actually. So, very happy that at least in terms of the time zones, we're all in the same region. Fantastic. I'm very excited to talk about this, but more so, I'm also going to talk a little bit about just how visibility works on the Play Store. So this could be kind of helpful for you if you're thinking about, driving at least, some of the organic installs in addition to your paid installs. Hopefully this helps, right? There's a lot of content here. There's a Q&A section at the end, I believe. So we can, definitely happy to take questions at the end about this, about Play, anything else as well. Okay, so let's kind of just jump into it. 3 parts. Each of these 3 parts are, kind of a standalone topic. First, I'm just going to go through very broadly what are the store listing elements. I think we are all familiar with the store, but we might not be familiar with what's available. Second, I'm going to cover like 4 principles for success, right? The 4 things that we kind of look out for in the Play Store and just algorithmically will play better to help your app, help your game get more visibility. And then the last bit I'm going to talk about, just how do we think about featuring on Play? How does visibility work? And of course the Q&A at the end. All right. Okay, before we dive into those 3 parts, why is this important, right? So, a lot of people underestimate the importance of the store listing. And, if you think about it, the store listing is first and foremost your first point of contact with your users. Beyond everything on the store, you can have the best game, but if your first point of contact is a poor one, then you're not going to get them to convert, and then you're not going to get them to monetize, right? So it's the upper end of the funnel, but it's one of the most important parts of the funnel. So it's easily overlooked, right? So, in this session, I will kind of go through the different elements of the store listing so that you can get, familiarize yourself with it, right? So, what are the store listing elements? So here's a very basic one. This is Genshin Impact. I think everyone's very familiar with Genshin Impact. So this straightforward, right? You have title, icon, screenshot, and preview video, right? If any of these things are unfamiliar to you, we have a great course on Play Academy that you can do and can learn more about each of these things. but I'll just broadly cover this in broad strokes first. So title, very obvious, that's the name of your game, 30 characters max. There's an icon as well. The icon is basically a visual summary of your game. It should be 512 by 512 pixels, basically a square. Screenshots, which show up right beneath. These are, you can do a maximum of 8, but a minimum of 4. And typically 16 by 9 aspect ratio works very well as screenshots. And then we have this thing called a preview video, which not often people are aware that you can upload a preview video to demonstrate in-game, in-app experience. And preview videos tend to do a lot better in driving conversion than you think, right? So I can't overemphasize the importance of a preview video. There are other aspects. If you scroll down, there's the description. So in the Play Store, there's a short description, there's a long description. The difference is the short description shows up when your app is on a standalone, it's truncated. You will see the title and then the short description. When they click into your store listing, they will see the full long description. So when you think about it, that those 3 elements, the title, the icon, and the short description, is basically your 10 seconds to convince a user to even explore your game, right? And I'll talk a little bit about how to nail that 10 seconds in the later parts. Beneath the description, there are tags. So obviously these tags, you can call them out based on your category and based on 5 tags that are relevant to your game. These tags are super important because they inform the store where to present your game and alongside which games to present. So if you think about it, you have maybe if you're creating a simulation game or an RPG, and if you mistag or you classify yourselves in a different category, you end up competing with a different demographic of users and a different demographic of app developers, which is something you don't want to do. So really just do spend some time thinking about which tags make the most sense and which categories make the most sense. And obviously the last bit here, which is super important, are ratings and reviews. In fact, ratings and reviews are often overlooked because people see that as a feedback channel, which it is a feedback channel, but it's a key source of data that the Play Store looks at to determine the quality of your game, how popular it is, and it can affect your engagement with users. So it's something I will dive a bit into later as well. So obviously the store listing, there are lots of elements. So these are some of those elements, and each element can be optimized in different ways to get maximum impact, right? So I'll talk a bit about that in this next section. All right, so this is where we get into the bones, the nitty-gritty. So there are kind of 4 principles of success here, and each of these principles are equally important, right? So it doesn't mean you do one, you can ignore the rest. Typically, we recommend developers to go through. It takes time to really get it up and running, but it's worth the investment. And this is not a set and forget investment. It requires constant updates and constant refreshers in order for it to be the most effective, right? So the 4 principles that we often repeat is, the first one is less is more. So think about, having more content on your store listing is not always the best, right? So summarizing it and highlighting the key unique selling point of your game is super critical. The second principle here is show, don't tell. There's a reason why the store listing is very graphic heavy. You have screenshots, icons, videos. There's a featured graphic as well. Typically, graphics are the better option to drive conversion. People don't really read beneath the fold. So really conveying the information in your graphics makes a big difference here. The third one is a bit more advanced. It's about localization. So if you're distributing your games outside of Indonesia, in different regions, especially in non-English speaking countries, investing in localization can make a huge difference in conversion. And obviously the last big one here is optimization, right? Optimization comes from many areas, but making sure that the frequency of the update is regular and that you are using the right tools on Play to do this. Because one thing that the store biases towards is more relevant and more recent games, just because the store wants to serve new content and up-to-date games to users, right? We don't want to serve a game that was last updated 5 years ago or 2 years ago. We want something that's more recent. So That's a big part of this. So I will go through each of this in a bit more detail, and it can get a bit heavy, but we can get through that. By the way, feel free to ask questions if you guys in the chat or something, if you guys spot something that you want to learn more. Okay, so the first one is around less is more, right? So how do you create a concise and succinct, apply this principle of being concise and succinct to your store listing? And the two places here are your title and your description. So these are some of the best practices that we have seen from many developers. Let me start with the title, right? Title, we do have guidelines. Obviously, don't use caps, don't use special characters, and don't use anything that's irrelevant to your app. Make sure that it's very specific, conveys the value of or what the core game is about. Do not use, we recommend making it as unique as you can. So it's very tempting to use similar, like putting categories in your title, like merge 3, right? Because it's a popular genre and that might get more hits. The truth is it's not. It's going to be more detrimental to helping segment your game against competitors and makes your game less interesting from a user acquisition standpoint. So make sure you avoid common terms, keep it simple, but don't repeat terms in your title. The other thing here is about summarizing the core value of your app or game, right? So this is an example here. Obviously, this is an app example. So, oftentimes users, the way that they think about whether to click into your store or download your game is about, that short description. So you'll see this quite often in certain apps. They put the core value they have in the title. So in this case, personal fitness diary, right? So immediately a user knows what they're getting from the game. So if you are from the app, if you have a game, maybe let's say an RPG, and one of your unique selling points here is that it's portable, easy to carry and go, consider putting that in the title, right? So it's very clear that it's a portable RPG or something that's portable and you can take on the go. So really convey that in the title. The same principles apply in the description. So it's very easy to say summarize your game or your apps in the description. But typically what we see from developers is summarizing it with short bullet points right at the start, highlight what's new. Those things make a lot more sense rather than burying it in the long description. So for example, if your game has a brand new content update or brand new feature, put that right at the top. Typically 3 or 4 bullet points, nothing more than that, because folks don't read beneath the fold. And if they are interested in more, then you can put the rest below. But summarize those 3 or 4 new changes or top selling features at the top of your store description. One thing that we often see, we often hear this myth that if you put more keywords in your description, that it will rank better somehow, or it will show up in searches better. That's completely not true. I have seen games and apps. The most atrocious one was 180 over keywords repeated in the description. It was indecipherable. It was completely no one could understand it. So putting more of the same difference at all in terms of visibility. So don't do that. Instead, save those keywords for the your key points at the top, and then really go deep into like what's different and what's unique about your game. So avoid keyword stuffing, essentially. Right. So that's the less is more principle, and it's most useful in these two areas. So the other one that's I would say equally important is show don't tell. So think about your store listing as a story that you want to tell users. It's it's an advertisement, and any great advertisement has a narrative behind it, right? What do you want the users to see and flow? So if you think about the user experience, the first 10 seconds, they see your icon, your title, and maybe your short description. Then they click into your store listing. They will see immediately, first thing they see is your preview video. Beneath that, they see your screenshots. So there is actually a sequence of things that you show the user. And that sequence is super important because how they see the information affects, how your app is perceived, right? And the narrative you want to tell. So remember that as you design that story, right? So start with the icon, right? most of the times the icon is the one that we if you have any resource to spend it on the icon, because the icon gets shown everywhere, right? It gets shown on the home page, it gets shown on the search results, it gets shown basically if you run promotional content as well, the icon is right there. So if you have anywhere to start with the icon. Simple things, don't include words because they won't be able to read it on the icon, it's too small. Don't include anything that can blend into the background. Typically, we recommend games especially to have a very distinct character or design element right at the forefront. So, you can reference big, great titles out there. Genshin's one where they showcase prominent characters very, very clearly as well. That is, a way to distinguish yourselves from other games. So do invest in that. The other thing here is remember that it's a story. The story should be consistent with your brand language. So oftentimes, it's very jarring for users to see an icon that's designed with a certain art style, but then your game is a completely different art style, and that causes a disassociation. So having your brand, that brand language consistent across your icon and other graphical elements is very important as well. All right, that's icon, right? And I'll talk a bit more about that later, actually. So I'll come back to that. Now, screenshot and preview videos are, if icon is what gets them to look at your store listing, screenshots and preview video is what gets them to install, right? So don't underestimate the impact of the screenshot, especially the first 3 screenshots, because the first 3 are by default shown, right? They don't need to scroll through the rest of the screenshots. So if they want to find out more, obviously they can, but the first 3 screenshots are the ones that kind of make or break, right? That we've seen consistently time and time again. So depends on whether you have a feature graphic. So if you have a feature graphic that shows up as the first slot of your screenshot, then your screenshot show up. So we highly recommend that if you have a feature graphic, use it to convey your top selling point of your game. So how do you think about this, right? Both for screenshot and preview video, you should order it in the same narrative structure that we talked about. So what do you want as your number one headline? So for example, if it's a game of a specific genre and your genre is RPG, for example, and you have your main selling point are these very quirky characters, then you should put that right up front. Put the main characters right up front, and then overlay text, short text to explain what this is about, right? So you've seen, some of you guys, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but games like Free Fire, for example, every time they do a new content drop, they update the whole range of screenshots to show what's new, and then they describe in 1 sentence or less, in 5 words or less even, what that new content is. So if you go on Free Fire now, you see that in your screenshot pool, the first screenshot is of a new character, if I'm not mistaken, a new character, and then there's a short description of a new mode that they can play in this update. So highlight what's new, highlight what's fresh, and keep it really straightforward, and tell that story over the 3 screenshots that you have right at the start. Okay, that's a lot, I know, but I'll come back to that in a bit. So just remember what I'm talking about here, and then we can revisit as well. All right, the third area is localization. This is a bit more advanced, and I know it's very easy to hear. People always talk about localization. It's like you should localize, but what does that mean, and how do you do it from a store listing perspective? So if you're familiar with the Google store listing, you can localize your store listing. There's what we call localized listings. You can also do what we call a custom store listing, right? And the difference is localized listing is essentially a translated version of your main store listing. That's it, right? But with custom store listings, you can do a brand new store listing. So new screenshots, new preview video, new everything for a specific market, right? So let's say you want to enter Japan, you want to have all new material for the Japanese market. You can do and achieve that with custom store listings, and then apply a translation on the custom store listing. So when we talk about localization, that's typically what we mean in terms of the store listing. So it is a bit heavier lift, It takes a bit more effort, but it is more useful than showing English in non-English speaking markets, for example. So a couple of best practices here, and I won't read through all the bullet points. There's a lot of content here. You can read that on your own. But for the title and description, really do consider what the users are interested in each of the markets that you're going for, right? So a user in Japan, which is heavily dominated by RPGs, what are they looking out for, right? Are they looking out for a specific story, more narrative driven? Is that something that they're more interested in versus maybe in a US market or a separate tier 1 market? They might be more interested in, what are the fun new game modes that I can pick up and play on the go, right? And these kinds of market differences make a big difference in how you basically tell that story about your listing in different markets. Right, so do consider this when you localize your listings. The other thing that's often overlooked are in-market events or in-market seasons, right? And typically, it's not that complicated most times, but it's an easy way to drive installs, an easy way to drive engagement, especially from a Play Store visibility standpoint. So as you know, every year, Play Store, we run many campaigns. We do like events, there's a Halloween one for the US market, New Year is a big one, Ramadan as well. We do a lot of these campaigns. And typically what happens is, we, as my colleague Dan probably talked about, promotional campaigns, events that are run in these seasons with the right themes and the right seasonality, what we call moments, tend to do better in conversion. They tend to be more relevant for users and hits them at the right moment. So in terms of from a visibility standpoint, having these seasonal moments in your store listing, whether it's just updating the icon to be like a New Year's icon or changing your screenshots to be a bit more festive during during Ramadan, those are quick ways that you can show relevance and timeliness for your store listing. And it sends a signal to the store that you have something fresh, you have something new, and therefore users should check you guys out, right? So don't overlook the importance of seasonality in different markets. One thing that we highly recommend is having a roadmap. So it doesn't have to be a comprehensive roadmap, but just take the time to take about 10 minutes, set out like which markets you want to really focus on. Don't pick more than 3. Start small and then lay out just what are those key moments in the year, and then plan kind of your content drops around those key moments so that when you update your store listing, you can have fresh content during these peak periods where it's much better versus having a stale listing and then it's not as visible on the store. All right, hang in there, we're nearly there. One last principle before I talk about featuring very quickly, and this is actually one of the more important principles, which is optimizing for impact, right? It's very tempting to set a store listing and just leave it. I've spoken to developers who have set a store listing and they've left it there for like 5-6 years, never did anything else with it, and then they wonder like why their organic traffic results from search and explore aren't doing so well. And it's because it's not optimized as times change. So do invest some time to update your store listing. Even investing in replying reviews. So when someone leaves your store, leaves your game a review, do take time to actually respond to that review. I mean, from a user engagement standpoint, it's great. It shows that it shows users and prospective users that you care and you're alive and you're active. But from a Play Store visibility standpoint, it also kind of signals to us that you are engaging and you are, it's basically fresh, right? You are engaging in real time or as real time as possible. That is a good signal for letting us know that your app's live, right? And your game's going to be supported in time to come. So do consider that responding to reviews. The other thing, and I put everything in the last one, which is test. Oftentimes this is more art than science, and there are experiments that we you can run on the store using store listing experiments for both your main store listing, your custom store listing, experimenting with different variants over time is a great way to make sure that you're landing the most impactful conversions in your store. And I'm going to briefly touch about this. There's a lot more content here, but so store listing experiments essentially allow you to A/B test live. You can dictate what percentage of your users see which version, and from there you can tweak different variables, right? And so what we're seeing is that if you do this correctly and you invest the time in doing this, anywhere between 13% in new user acquisitions is something that we've seen, or 14% increase in 1 day retained installs, which is also a great metric. This is a great way to kind of figure out, especially those seasonal moments, like how your seasonal campaigns might perform versus your regular store listing, right? And then optimize from there, right? And some tips here, if you're going down this route, highly recommend starting with your icon. As I talked about, your icon is super important, and then test only one element at a time. So don't change the whole store listing, otherwise you won't know what works and what doesn't. But start, change the icon, test that, change the first 3 screenshots, test that, and then see if the results are positive, heading in the right direction. One last thing here to note is if you're going to run an experiment, let it run to its conclusion, right? Minimum 2 weeks. If there's no conclusive result, let it continue to run, because it's better to have better data than making arbitrary changes. So let it run, right? Okay, so we've covered a lot on principles, and I'm nearly at the end now. I did want to quickly talk about this because I know it's the number one topic we get asked of a lot. Like, how do you get featured? How do you grow visibility on Play? And I thought it'd be useful to cover this. So if you guys watched our Google I/O recently, we actually, for the first time ever, we had a session that we talked about what actually goes into the visibility of apps and games. And the store is very focused now on quality, right? You hear this very often. You hear this again for sure. Quality is a mix of different factors, but and I'll go through that in a bit. But basically, we want to deliver user experiences that meet users in the right moments, right? That's the most important thing to us. So whether your app and your game is meeting users, delivering a great user experience, making them come back for more, that's something we heavily prioritize, right? And that feeds into your store listing as well, right? So same principles apply across. And this is what we announced at I/O. Of course, I will share, links are on screen. You can go check it out. But there are basically 2 parts to this. One is, building a high quality app or game. So these are 4 areas we look at. I won't go into each area. I don't have time for that. But basically what we want to ensure is across these 4 areas. So core value, which is the main value of your app. User experience, which is, are users having a good time? Is your app well optimized? Technical quality, making sure it's stable, your application not responding rates or ANR or crash rates are above the threshold. And of course, lastly, privacy and security. So users understand what data, what permissions are required from them, and they are able to give consent to that. And you'll notice the bottom half is about high quality presence. So everything we talked about today about store listing falls in this bucket. And what my colleague Dan talked about, promotional content, also falls in this bucket. So this is a huge second element as well. So links on screen if you want to check out more resources on this. And here are some additional resources that we've kind of rolled out. So there's a new quality hub online. If you search, Google Play Quality Hub, it's the first result. There's also a great explanation page on how to get featured on Google Play. And it goes through some of the examples I talked about. And there's a video on our YouTube channel that is a 20-minute video that kind of explains how quality feeds into visibility on the store and how your store listing does as well. So these are some additional resources to check out. All right, how am I on time? Because I think this is my last slide. Yeah, so I'm on Q&A. Hopefully that was useful.
Okay, thank you for the session. I think it's very interesting that you share about the fitting feature, because last year I interviewed Guy from Play Store in the Agi session, and he says that there's only one question I cannot ask, right? We just want to get feature on, but now you answer it. Okay.
Yeah, we
Okay.
become more open and transparent nowadays. Yeah.
Okay. We have a lot of question in the chat, I think. Yeah. I think
Okay, so
the
let me see.
yeah. Yeah, I think the first from me, right? Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about the title that is have like the subtitle like game name slash the some kind of the genre or something? This
Yeah.
really
So like what sorry, I'm trying to open the chat. Forgive me, I'm very bad at Zoom. Oh, okay, I
oh
see
yeah
it now. Okay, sorry. So how do we is the question about subtitles in the title, right?
yeah yeah
Okay,
because
so
there's lot of example of the game that use that kind of format, right? The game name slash subtitle like
yes.
idle clicker something merge something.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. One is we strongly discourage games or apps in general to put the name of the category in the title because that's what the tags are for. So you're kind of wasting that space. A user who looks at let's say a bunch of games, they're not going to be like, they want to merge three games. So they know that all these games are merged three games. So putting merge three in the title, for example, RPG, may not necessarily be a good use of space. So that's one. So put that in the category tags. That's a better, more efficient way to do it. But it's good practice to typically think about what distinguishes your game, right? So or what's the most relevant update to your game. So the great example, and I always go back to like Free Fire, and if they have a new season, that's in the title, right? They put season 6 or whatever. So
Yeah
having that, yeah, so they know users who see your game or are following your game, they know that okay, there's something new now. I'm gonna reinstall, I'm gonna re-engage. The other way to think about it is if your game has a very distinct mechanism or very distinct like gameplay element, just consider putting that in the title, in a subtitle as well, right? Or in a short description. So for example, right, if you're I'm going to use like Minecraft, right? If the whole element is about open world, like open world, build anything you want, right? Just put that, put that in either a short description or obviously I'm not a very good creative here, but think of a way to summarize that key value or key distinguishing factor and put it in the title. Of course, 30 characters or less, but that's a good way to distinguish your game from everyone else, right? So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, let me know if I
yeah
answered the
okay
question.
thank you. Yeah also yeah I will ask the question in the chat and everyone who want to ask you can also raise hand, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for
Next,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, we have also question from Dan from Anoa. He asked about the screenshot that a lot of games have a description in the screenshot. So he's asking that is it better to use without any text at all, or just or having like a description in the screenshot? Yeah, I think
Right.
that's the
So no, that's a great question. So most times we encourage putting at least a short blurb in the screenshot to contextualize what you're seeing. So think about the screenshot as basically you're telling like storyboarding your user flow or storyboarding your value proposition. So the first part of your storyboard, you should definitely have the main element and then caption that to let users know what that main element is, and then so on and so forth. I would say this isn't necessary if okay, so just sharing. If you have UI elements, right? So it's very common these days, and we highly recommend doing this if you have in-game interfaces that you want to show, but like to give users an understanding of what the game looks like what they can expect from a UI perspective. Do that. That's also okay. So to be fair, this is more common for apps. So apps that have a certain interface, they want users to actually see what they're going to get from the app. You can put that in, and that sometimes is a good enough substitute. But most times for games, you do want to tell that story, you do want to tell that narrative. Putting in captions makes a big difference. Yeah.
okay. Then does it answer the question? Then
By the way, I'm so sorry that I didn't know the screen was a bit small earlier. I hope you guys didn't miss anything on the slides.
yeah yeah this is good. Okay. We're moving on to the next question, right? Okay. So you're saying that you have like the most important is like 3 screenshots, right? But
Yeah.
how much is the optimal one? How many screenshots and when is it becomes too much? Like
Yeah, I think so.
how
We have a
much?
maximum of 8, I think, and I can't recall if that includes featured graphic. But there's a limit to the number of screenshots, so you can't put like a lot. But typically just having the 3 is already good enough. You need a minimum of 4 if I'm not mistaken. But the first 3 is where you should really just put all your effort in. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the first is like the ideal way to put as the first screenshots, right?
I'm sorry,
Okay.
to put as your first screenshot.
No, I think that yeah, no, I think what you explained is that the first 3 is like the yeah, I think the mandatory one we can use as our first version of the store
Yeah.
listing, right? Yeah, I think that's the
Yes.
understanding.
So actually, I do want to add a bit more context and a bit more color on this. So I think it's very oftentimes we think about screenshots as a way to either showcase content, showcase gameplay, or showcase what the user interface looks like. So that's very typical. But a lot of developers have been very creative with their screenshots. So they have shown things like what the monetization offering is. So let's say if you have a battle pass, what those possible options are, like a premium pass, a basic pass. Like you can use the screenshot portion to really talk about like what can users expect from basically anything in your game. So I would strongly encourage just thinking beyond just like the 3 elements we talked about, gameplay, content, UI. There's a lot more you can do with screenshots to highlight even simple things, like if you have one element of your game that has a great like art style and like it's very distinct, you could dedicate that one whole panel just for that to really distinguish your game from everyone else. So like be creative, but obviously there are some rules, right? Nothing offensive, appropriate content. But yeah, so monetization options, talking about that in the screenshots can help set expectations, especially for freemium games, where some folks might be thrown off, right? They download your game, and then it contributes to a bad user experience, bad retention numbers, high uninstall rates. Setting the expectation up front can be helpful to get high quality users so that you retain better as well. So that's something additional to consider if you want. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. Point. Okay, next we'll we will go to the next question, right? Also everyone, if you want to ask, you can raise question. You can raise hand. I didn't see a raise hand yet in the Zoom. Okay, Calvin. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think this is a great opportunity to to roast my own page, if you will. So because we have the professional here, right? So we are about to release our game by next week, and this is our pre-register page. So if you
Right.
maybe have the time, please.
Let me see.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I screen share it? I guess I'm screen sharing it now. So
Yeah, sure.
okay.
It's for public
Right.
anyway.
Okay. So like are you asking like kind of what can be improved or
Yeah.
like okay. So I think just let's apply the principles, right? The principles that we talked about here. So first one, less is more, right? Like title. Horror Village Sukawedi. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing it Sukawedi. And I'm assuming so a couple of things. Is your game targeted only for Indonesia?
At the beginning, yes.
Okay. So just looking at this, I think it's good. It's a good start. Title, just going from top to bottom, title itself may not do so well outside of Indonesia. And also if you have a specific reason for a user to click in, may not be as strong, right? Perhaps from a subtitle perspective, is there a special hook to your story here? Is it like a mystery? It sounds like it's a mystery game, something that might intrigue some mystery folks. So maybe that could be a good way of, obviously this is just what I'm seeing. We need to look at the data a bit more, but that could be one way to look at it. the icon looks great, I think. Let's look at the screenshots, right? So from this perspective here, great use of space, great subtitle, but is that the first thing a user should know about your game, right? It's the first thing you want them to know about it as encounter rare ghosts, right? So if you think about it, does that differentiate you from your other competitors, and does that encounter rare ghosts represent the most important part of your game? If it is, then that's fine. But if it isn't, typically, I've seen developers who do like mystery style games or narrative driven games talk about like, kind of like the core element of the story that to hook users. So like explore a murder that's in this setting or something like that, right? So if it's a narrative driven game, that could be a one way to get that hook in. And then obviously the next couple of screenshots, it will apply as well as how you tell that story. So just looking at the description as well, just applying the principle of less is more. It's a lot of text, and it's good from a narrative standpoint, but you could consider again just summarizing in bullet points very quickly, like what are those key elements, right? So you already have it in your text, but perhaps just calling it out as a standalone point so it's more digestible is more useful. There are a couple of other things here. I don't have time to go through all, but preview video that we talked about. If you do have a preview video for your main store listing once it launches, do consider doing that. That's a great way to have conversion. Obviously ratings and reviews, you don't have it yet because it's a pre-register content. So that's some off the top of my head, just looking at this, that's one area. Those are some areas to look at. That said, if you go to your Play console and you look at your store performance, there's one thing there you can kind of examine to take it up a notch, which is under the ratings and reviews section, you can actually see what's driving. Under the store performance section, you can actually see what keywords are driving traffic to your store listing. And so once you understand what that search trend is, I will consider optimizing, based on that search trend, putting in the right descriptions in your short description or your long description to address those keyword searches. It's quite straightforward. I think if you go in now, you'll be able to see like, probably, horror games are probably one of the top ones. And then, you'll be able to see like whether it's a positive drive or negative sentiment as well. So you can customize that to address some of the concerns that people are searching for on the store. But that's a bit more advanced and take a bit more like investment, I think. All right, that's a lot. Does that make sense?
Yes, and one last thing. Do you know like what is the best tags for horror game? Because Google Play Store doesn't have a tag for horror game.
Right.
Usually the competitor use adventure, sometimes use puzzle, so it's not really sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's a good question. I unfortunately don't know that off the top of my head. One way to kind of look around this is if you go in the console again, you should be able to see a bunch of, under the ratings and review section, you should be able to see a bunch of suggested options, if I'm not mistaken. But unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head, like what would be the best combination in this case. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But maybe before we continue, I think the interesting part about the study case from Calvin is that from the 3 screenshots, is it like the first one is the most important, and then the second and the third, right? Is it like is it a priority between the first 3 screenshots?
Screenshots, as in which is the more important? The most important is obviously the first screenshot, then the second screenshot, then the third screenshot. Yeah, so in that order. I wouldn't say that, so the only exception to this is if you have a featured graphic. So if you have a featured graphic, that will show up as the first, you take the first slot of your screenshot panel. Yeah.
Okay. I think maybe the question for the next question is that from me, that can you give a good a study case that you have reviewed a lot of store listing? Which one is you think is the good example that we can follow, we can copycat, and which one is the bad example that we have to avoid, right? To summarize the session.
Yeah, no problem. I probably can't talk about a bad example, but I think that's not
Okay.
fair. But I always go back to, I feel Genshin Impact, and this is probably for me, I don't speak on behalf of Play, but I feel like they do it really well, right? I think they understand that, a store listing is a live thing. It needs to be constantly, tweaked. So if you go to, some of these big titles, you'll see that oftentimes, they have a lot of great like preview videos, they have great icons that update every season. They have, screenshots that are seasonality based, and they show in-game content, new content. Those are great examples. Sometimes they don't reply to reviews. That's not so ideal, but you should ideally reply to your reviews. And they do a very great job in kind of summarizing the, very succinctly in the descriptions, like, what's the top point you want someone to know, right? So yeah, in this case, it's the story. But in other cases, it can be a gameplay element very well. So, I'm biased. I think that's one. Genshin Impact is great. But yeah, I think Free Fire does a great job as well. So all the big titles, they do a fantastic job. One more actually comes to mind, which does great localized, kind of Indonesian store listing, which is Pokemon Go, by Niantic.
Pokemon Go.
Yeah, so theirs is very well, crafted. Always has a, it's actually localized. So if you are in Indonesia, you'll see one kind of store listing. If you're in somewhere else, you see a different kind of store listing, and then it resonates based on market. So it's very different and it resonates differently. So that's another one to check out as well. But these are just my own preferences. Yeah.
Okay. So I think the lesson is that for everyone here, you can find like the popular game and study from their sources, right? Example are Genshin, Free Fire, and Pokemon Go, right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
think
that's a good way. Yeah.
Okay. We also have question from Andre from Tomomi Games. So
Recording stopped.
if we do localized title, will all of them will be searchable?
Localized style. Sorry, could you repeat
Localized
that?
title. Yeah, that's the one to check. If you do like the localized title, so you're saying about the localized store listing and the custom store listing, right? So is it like if you use the localized title, will the title also localize, and how does it impact the searchable in the other region?
No, that's a great question. So yes, if you localize your store listing using localized listings or custom store listings, yeah, it will. So let me be a bit technical here and how, maybe this will help explain how this kind of works. So the way that we serve a store listing is based on two factors. It's based on the device language. So on every Android device, there's a default language that can be English, Japanese, Bahasa, Indonesia, everything. And then there's a store setting, right? The store setting dictates like what store you're in, right? So those two things are essentially how the store decides which one to serve. So let's say, right, if you are in Indian, I'm going to use Japan because more non-English speaking, right? In Japan, if you have if you were to go over today and your device is an English device, but you're accessing the Japan store, you will see an English version of the Japan listing, right? So that's one way to think about it. If you're a Japanese and you're in the Japanese store, you'll see the Japanese version of the store listing. So that means that when you search or when you look for the same game, they will show up differently based on what your device language setting is and the store that your default store that you usually the store that you're accessing from is. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I know it's a bit confusing, but basically what this allows you to do is, again, just giving another hypothetical example, so maybe it'll be a bit clearer. So if you are, let's say you want to enter the Japanese market, right? And in Japan, let's say, again, hypothetically, you're doing a language learning app, right? You want your language learning app offers Japanese as a language. So if I want to target English speaking users in Japan, then I would do a custom store listing for English, but for the Japanese market. So the users with English language devices will see the English language version in the Japanese store. And that way I can have a different, entirely different store listing that shows them, oh, learn, like ever get left out when going out for drinks with your buddies, like, something like that. They can see that kind of unique content for that language in that market. And then you can show something completely different to Japanese audiences that have Japan device.
Recording in progress.
The Japan device language. And then for that, you can show something entirely different, something as, preparing for your next business trip, learn Korean, right? And then they will see something completely different. So that's how it works. And that feeds into, when you search, it will come up differently as well, based on those two factors. Yeah. I know it's a bit confusing, but it makes sense.
Sorry, I think you're the one that asked the question. Can I clarify a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I'm asking this because I think, as you know, Japanese use a different character, right? They use hiragana or katakana. I'm just wondering, would there be, if there is two title, let's just say A is using English and the other title is using Japanese, will both of them will be searchable, or you cannot actually put a different title on because I think I saw title being able to be localized, right? I think
you can localize it in a local language. Yes, you can.
Yes. So let's just say it have a couple of names, right? Not a couple of names. I guess one is in English, one is just in katakana. Will both be searchable, or only the original name will be searchable?
So as far as I know, if you're entering the store with your device settings set to English, then when you search for it, you will see the English show up, the English title and the English listing. But if you're entering the store with a Japanese device language, then when you search for the English version, you shouldn't see that, but you will see the Japanese title and the Japanese store listing.
Oh.
Yeah.
But so the search keyword works, right?
Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So can you search for the Japanese title instead?
Yeah, my understanding is that you can. So it should show up regardless, but what you see will be either in English based on your device option or Japanese based on your device language. So that would be the main difference. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yeah.
So I think the conclusion is that if you have a different title, all of them will be searchable, but only the store listing in your region will be shown to the user, right?
Localized version. Yeah.
Okay. So you can search with English or the Japan, and it will still searchable. Okay.
Yes, that's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Arviana that when you're saying about the Play Store and test, right? The question is that how do you measure the UX quality, right? Yeah. Maybe Arvi, if you want to clarify from the ratings or what kind of measurement.
Yeah, so I see so many measurement around there in your presentation, but is it like review or ratings is really important to this UX measurement, or is it from the build that we upload on the Google Play Store?
Sorry, just to clarify, are you asking so I missed the last part. Is it ratings or review that's most important, or?
Yeah. Is it important to calculate the UX, or is it from the build that we uploaded from the for the Google Play Store, or is there any measurement for this?
Right. Okay. No, I get what. So you mean actually this, right? This.
Yeah, this part.
Yeah. So no, that's a fantastic question, and you're not gonna like the answer because we don't have a clear answer, unfortunately. So there are many components that kind of go into the algorithm, and honestly, we don't know what the exact combination is. They don't tell us because they think that the engineers think that if we know, it's also not very fair, and we end up biasing and gaming the system. So it's not. So we don't know all of that. But that said, right? One thing that we do know is that from an in-app experience standpoint, it is the onboarding period when someone plays a game, right? The first 10 minutes, that plays a big role as well that impacts the user experience. So oftentimes we encourage developers to think about when you're building a great user experience, really focus on the onboarding, make sure that users understand what the core loop is. They don't, you're showing them sufficient time to understand the core mechanics of the game before you you dump them out and ask them to pay or monetize them. So that's typically what we recommend. The other elements such as ratings and reviews, those tend to go more in the bottom category, the higher quality store presence. But from an in-game perspective, that's typically what we recommend. Obviously, we don't have a specific like metric that we can share that this is something that 100% means that you get a lot of visibility on the store. But that's what we have now. I do want to add some additional color here. So for user experience and core value, there are certain guidelines that we have, and these are public online. And all the guidelines that we've shared are things that we actually look at, right? So for user experience, for example, things such as making sure it's built for accessibility. So if you have your game that caters for the colorblind, has high contrast colors as an option, that's a great thing. So we know that user experience will be better and more accessible. Having users having the option to be on built for the right form factors is a big part of this as well. So if you have a game or an app that's like built for tablets, then it should be optimized for tablets, right? Well optimized. Instead of having bad UI crammed on a small device, you should be optimizing it for the right form factor. So those things are things that we also look out for. And I think the more important thing here is to think about this as delivering the best possible experience to users in a way that's easily digestible and easy for them to get started. A lot of times we see a lot of apps and games that are not a great user experience, right? When you start it, in order to even play a single match or in order to get into the core gameplay, you have to go through like 4 different ads, 5 different ads, and then you have to go through a paywall, and then you have to go through like a sign up process. All these things are not great user experience. It prevents the user from engaging in the core loop of your app or your game, right? So that's something that is not great user experience and not great core value. So that's the guideline that we try to recommend folks to think about as well. Yeah, hope that's helpful. Unfortunately, I can't give a specific answer on this one. Yeah,
I think for your explanation, I think I wonder how do Google get the data from the first 10 minutes, right? Because I think a lot of people use Firebase, and in the Android maybe they have Google Analytics, right? But is it like only on the Android part, or only for the using Firebase? Yeah.
no, so actually first thing, couple of things I'll clarify. It's not just the first 10 minutes, but first 10 minutes is a good rule of thumb. It's a good rule of thumb to think about. But in terms of data, yeah, actually, even in the console, the Play console, you can
of people here, 20 teams that are on the early access. And I also talked with Guy, I think, in the email. So is it possible to get featured for the access? And they said that, of course, if the team fulfill the criteria, like the criteria for the feature, so that they can get promoted, featured on the early access. So can you give like the overview, like what they should do? So the app on the early access, we can propose it to Google to get featured for the early access part. Yeah.
No,
Is there any method to get?
Yeah. No. So that's a great question. So again, it depends. So this applies not just for early access featuring, it kind of applies across featuring. There are if there is something that you feel is great to feature, I think, I don't know what Guy shared, but probably we do have a form somewhere, if I can't remember where the form is, but but we cannot guarantee featuring. I think at the end of the day,
Yeah.
even Guy and I, we can't make that decision to feature. But that said, you know, if there's something out there that's really like interesting, you feel like would do, you know, do well, you know, you can reach out to us, you can try. But again, it's very popular featuring, so most of the times also we can't even get through. But it really depends, yeah. So in short, you know, let us know, we can try, but then we can't guarantee. Yeah.
So I think the context is, for my question, is that the one you said in here, right? The invite qualifier is usually for the people who already published the game on full, right? On the
Right.
full launch, right? Yeah, because in the
It's-
early access there can be some things is not finished yet, usually,
Yes.
right? So maybe they're still a bit on the technical quality, on the privacy. So do you have like the advice and what kind of things they should focus on so they have better chance to get featured for the early
Right.
access? Yeah, I think that's the question, right?
No, that's a good question. That's a tough question actually. I may not have the answer for this. That, you know, typically early access featuring does you know, factor in more about like which specific markets and moments make the most sense. You know, some early access featuring I've seen, if they're doing like, you know, a huge global launch and there's a big campaign and there's a big push behind it, sometimes, you know, that plays a bit better. But specifically as to like what the featuring team looks at, I also don't really have a clear answer there. I'm sorry. In terms of getting that featuring process for EXS is a bit gray as well. But that said, I do want to, you know, caveat by saying, you know, as you do your early access, you know, there is an algorithmic process as well beyond the manual way. The algorithmic way is a bit more. I also don't really know what goes into it, but simple things like just making sure that your pre-reg, you know, is well completed, the store listing is complete and it's up to date, having the right you know, investing in having a clear like pre-reg campaign is something else as well. But beyond that, honestly, I'm also not very clear, unfortunately.
I think that's all. And we also have we already passed the 1 hour mark.
Yes.
And that's the last question. Thank you for your time, Zoe, and hopefully the session give a lot of insight for everyone here. And so
No problem at
everyone
all.
will be ready to improve their store listing and publish to
and
early access.
yeah, if you ever like, I mean, feel free, I mean, to reach out. And you know, if we'll try our best to help, but let us know if there's anything that we can, you know, provide guidance on or some help with. Yeah. But yeah, hope it was useful. Very happy to be here. Yeah.
Thank you. I think for closing, let's give applause to Zhong for all the session. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Zhong. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Have a good evening, everyone.
Ya, thank you, Fian. Oke, buat teman-teman,
Thank you,
thank you
Zhong.
buat waktunya. Teman-teman Friendship, jangan lupa kita akan ada sesi terakhir dari Google di hari Sabtu. Dan akan ada announcement juga dari panitia ya, di semoga Senin. Oke, thank you semuanya. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Ya, goodbye.
Bye.